Hello class. Today we're going to talk about density. There's a couple key words that are important. One of them is density, mass, volume, gravity force, floating, sinking, and units of density. Volume is something important to understand when we're learning about density. Volume is just the amount of space that's taken up in a 3D object. The formula for volume is its volume equals length times width times height. It's just something you've already learned in a math class, but we're going to take it into terms with density. And volume is just exactly how big an object is. So it's the amount of space an object takes up. And when we're talking about volume, what we're doing is we're going to be comparing two things. We want to compare the volume of a smaller box to a larger box. Not all times does the larger box always have a greater volume or mass than a smaller box. So to find density, what we're going to do is we're going to also talk about mass next. And mass comes into play with density and volume. Now that we've learned about volume, we're going to go into terms of mass now. Mass is just how much matter is in an object. And a lot of people think of weight when we think of an object, but weight and mass is different. Weight is how much we weigh on the earth, but mass is an actual mass. We would have the same mass on the moon as we would the earth, but our weight would be different. And something that we always know is different measurements for mass, and mass can come into all different measurements. One we use in America is pounds, but all over the country they use kilograms, tons, ounces, different things like that. So we're going to be finding how many ounces for liquids and how many grams for solids an object actually weighs. Water at the liquid state has a density of 1 gram per milliliter. Now class, I just want you to remember, just make sure you're writing down all the notes of the different bullet points that I have on the slideshow for you, because it's going to be really important information, because at the end there's going to be a quiz over all of this. But with water, let's just remember that it has 1 gram per milliliter. And another thing, the water actually can change density. At room temperature, it has 1 gram per milliliter, but when the temperature of the room changes, the density becomes less or the density can become more. And with ice or solid water, it actually becomes less density. This is one of the only objects that when it's a solid compared to a liquid, it's less dense. And that's how we get icebergs floating on water. Icebergs actually only have about 20% of the entire iceberg visible above the water, but ice is still floating on the water, which is just something always beautiful to see. But so we're going to do a lot of tests with water. We're going to put objects inside the water and we're going to see if they float in water or sink in water. So that way we can know that the object is either more than 1 gram per milliliter or less than 1 gram per milliliter. Now that we've gotten through all the vocabulary of the density unit, we're going to learn about the experimental parts of the density unit. There's a liquid test and a solid test. With the solid test, all it is we're going to place a solid object in water, and we're going to see which one. We're going to put two objects. So we're going to see if one object is more dense than another object. And also, while we're doing that, some objects are going to float, therefore we're going to know they're less dense than water. With the liquid test, it's going to be more of an experiment that you've done like as a little kid, where you've put many different liquids into one container and watch them separate and go in multiple layers. But now we're going to actually test the density of each of the liquids. So for instance, many people do vegetable oil, honey, water with food coloring, and just see which one is less dense and which one is more dense. But with our experiment, what we're going to do is I'm going to have an egg, actually 2 eggs, and I'm going to have tap water and I'm going to have salt water. And we're going to do an experiment and see if an egg floats in tap water, or if an egg floats in salt water, and then add more salt to the salt water to see what the changes is. So make sure you're paying attention, and here is the experimental video.
Do a lesson on density. We have normal tap water and we have salt water. The salt water is from table salt, nothing special about it. The next thing we're going to talk about is the density of normal tap water. Normal tap water has a density of 1 gram per milliliter, and salt water has a density, depending on the amount of salt in it, it can be upwards of 2 grams per milliliter. We're going to drop the egg in each glass, and we're going to see which one sinks and which one floats. First, we're going to drop it in tap water. And as you can see, the egg sinks. We're going to drop it in salt water and see what happens. And as you can tell, the density of the water is more dense than the egg. That's why the egg floats. And if I pour more salt, the egg will bounce because of the density. So even if I push it down, the water is still more dense and therefore the egg floats.
If you want to see how colored water can be stacked on top of each other, watch this. Add 1 spoonful of sugar to the first cup, 2 to the second cup, 3 to the third cup, and 4 spoonfuls of sugar to the fourth cup. Add 60 milliliters of warm water to each cup and stir it to dissolve it well. To help with the dissolving, you can put it in a microwave for 30 seconds and then stir it again. Make sure all the sugar is dissolved in the water.
That's the end of the density unit. I hope you're able to learn a lot, and if you need to, you can always go back and watch this video over and over and take better notes, make changes to your notes so that you can get a better grade on the test. Have a great day, class.